Hi, this is the Dr. Deborah Show, and this is the show where we talk about bringing peace and calm into your life. Later in the show, we'll be talking about mental health stigma. We're at KCSB FM Santa Barbara 91.9. KCSB is a platform for cultural expression and thoughtful discussion, providing a diverse educational forum. And I am a Santa Barbara-based clinical psychologist, and I specialize in pediatric neuropsychology. And during my clinical training and my current work, I've treated thousands of people, and my experiences are very vast, and I wanted to share my information with you. I'm also a UCSB alumni, and I live locally in Santa Barbara, and this show's all about our community and how to create compassionate conversations about our well-being and health. Again, I want to welcome our listeners to the Dr. Deborah Show. It's wonderful to have you with us. And as a reminder, this show is psychoeducational and is in the area of neuropsychology and well-being. And it is not meant to replace professional mental health advice or therapy. So if you do believe you suffer from a particular disorder, please do reach out for professional help. Today on the show, we're talking about mental health and well-being with a focus on professional athletes and basketball with our very special guest, Curt Pickering. Curt has an appreciation and a deep philosophy of how to motivate and appreciate the great athletes that engage at the highest level of play. Curt's NBA experience began in 1985 as director of player personnel and head coach in the NBA Summer Pro League. And there he met and developed a kindred relationship with Bill Bertka of the Lakers and began scouting for him. Later, he scouted for the Indiana Pacers, New Jersey Nets, and Charleston Gunners. And he was also a scout for the New Jersey Nets, and then accepted opportunities internationally in China, Dubai, Bahrain, the Philippines, Kuwait, Hungary, Ireland, Czechoslovakia. He's got to travel to lots of places, Austria and Germany, and in the minor leagues. He also has worked for 10 years owning and coaching the Santa Barbara Breakers, which is a pro minor league team. And they traveled extensively to China and Europe 15 times before returning to scout when he returned to scout for the Indiana Pacers. Curt was also head coach for the NBA All-Stars Pro League, Summer Pro League from 1985 to 1997, where he worked with the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Dallas Mavericks, Boston Celtics, and many other teams. He also has worked extensively as a director of player personnel for many teams. And behind the scenes, he has worked extensively in the development of coaching staff-player roster relationships that greatly affects the level of play and the harmony necessary off the court, on the road, and in the locker room. And his strengths as a coach are a willingness to do whatever is asked, and no matter how large or small the task, with a specialty as a shooting coach. And he studied the mechanics, psychological, and human behavioral factors of the greatest shooters over the past 50 years. Curt's great love for the game of basketball has influenced the basketball world, and he sees each day and each game as a great opportunity to express gratitude and meet each challenge with vigor and enthusiasm. Welcome to the show, Curt.
Thank you.
We're so excited to have you on. I think this is a really great topic for us because I know a lot of people are being influenced by basketball and what's been going on with Kobe Bryant. So I think we can maybe talk a little bit about that. And what will be coming up next, I'll talk a little bit about mental health stigma, mental health and professional athletes in basketball, and then maybe a bit about prevention and awareness through professional athleticism and basketball. And we're talking about mental health stigma today because mental health is the largest public health priority. It's also the largest financial burden that's of any health issue in the world, according to the World Health Organization and World Economic Forum. There's a beautiful report that the Centers for Disease Control wrote that found that stigma and embarrassment are two of the top reasons why people with mental health issues do not seek help or medication. I also just like to always impress upon people that issues surrounding mental health affect all of us. I mean, none of us are really immune from it. And I think the newer philosophies are it's kind of like sometimes we have flus or colds or something more serious going on. So we have to address that. And the way I describe mental health is like a physiological balance, meaning your nervous system, your heart, your brain, and your thoughts are kind of beating and running at a smooth rate. Not too erratic or extreme, and that gives us each a sense of inner peace, just to put that simply. I was wondering, Curt, how would you describe mental health?
Well, I think it's about dealing with our everyday occurrences, our situations. How do we treat the challenges we face? You know, the longer I live this life, I realize there's a lot of pain that comes with pleasure, and we're always going to be faced with challenges that, how do we respond to it? Mm-hmm. Whether that's with a relationship, that it can entail so many different things.
Yep.
You know,
so many facets. It's true. So basically, you kind of think that we all have different things that come up in our life that we end up having to sort of face, and that affects the way we regulate our mental health.
Right. And, you know, of course we self-evaluate ourselves. I guess everything's a choice. It's a choice if we allow other people's opinion to affect us, or if we really truly believe in ourselves, and we're not trying to please them. You know, it's all about finding that sense of purpose, and that peace. You know, whether we're in a real high-driven life of whether it's career or, you know, the attention we draw to ourselves, like many do. But to me, it's about how you respond to your daily occurrences.
I was thinking as I'm looking, because I know you're wearing that Kobe Bryant shirt because you said you were at the game, a couple games recently, and I know you knew Kobe, and I was thinking how our external world really does impact people's mental health. I've noticed this last week or so in my office, just listening to people, almost every person has brought up the Kobe Bryant death and loss. And I think it's not just him, it's also, you know, his daughter, it's these other families, it's how somebody who was so on the tip of something so big, even though, you know, life has all the sweetness, it can also have a lot of bitterness, you know, and so I think that affects our mental health too, you know, and how we cope with that. When I know that you probably have other thoughts on that, so we'll visit that shortly. But if you're just joining us, we're here with Curt Pickering, and we're exploring the relationship between mental health and being a professional athlete or playing basketball. And recently in last May, the NBA, the National Basketball Players Association, spoke up and basically everyone who plays the game and watches the game can benefit from several NBA stars who have been privately and publicly discussing their experiences with mental health issues and highlighting their struggles and urging others to seek care when needed. And in response to that, the National Basketball Players Association launched its mental health and wellness program, I think in May of 2018. So that's a really wonderful thing where they've established this network of psychologists. And I know you were talking a little bit about that just before we got on the air, about the kind of different systems that have been put in place for mental health resources. Do you want to share maybe just briefly what you said? Because it's good for people to know, because I think that way it makes it also more acceptable, I guess, if we have people we really look up to that are doing things to take care of themselves.
Sure.
Thanks.
You know, if we stick with, you know, what the subject matter of what I've dealt with the last 40 years, professional basketball, one player that comes to mind, and it's public, it's, you know, it's a pretty big story, is Keon Dueling, who played for the Clippers. He played for a few other teams. He was going to play with Boston Celtics, and he had an absolute meltdown because there was some things that happened that summer, and this is probably 8 years ago, that triggered all his emotions of his childhood. When he was 12 years old, he was sexually molested. And he kept that hidden. He told nobody. He wouldn't deal with it. He now had 2 children, but he went into severe depression. And this was a guy that played extremely aggressive on the court. He played with fire. Mm-hmm. You know, you saw that competitiveness on the floor, street tough. Yet behind that
veneer, facade. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, was someone that, quite frankly, like us all, he was broken. We're all broken.
Well, actually, the Japanese, I like when people talk about the word broken, what they do, like with bowls, for example, that have cracks in them, they actually fill them with gold because they feel like those cracks, you know what I mean? Those actually deepen us as a person. But you brought up a couple really important points, I think. I mean, one, I think sexual abuse is actually much, much more common than people realize. And I hope sometime in the future we'll be able to talk more about that. I think there's so much shame and guilt and confusion around that for people. And then also you brought up trauma and how it was like he reached kind of his reaching point. And I have a theory I've copyrighted, which is I call it the compounding theory of stress. And it's kind of like putting money in the bank where, you know, you have a little something happen. Maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal at some point in our life. Maybe it's somewhat traumatic, depending on how you're wired. And then, you know, kind of put that away and then something maybe a little bigger and then a little bigger. And pretty soon our nervous system really cannot tolerate that putting away. And I call that the kicker. And it kind of kicks us into another place that we just can't compartmentalize. So that sounds like that's what happened with him too. Plus having kids probably remind him of that, or maybe the stress of being famous. You know what I mean? It sounds like he was a famous player and had a lot of demands on him.
Yeah, and I just think there's certain points in our lives where, past experiences can come up.
Well, yeah, for sure.
And then you've got a Kevin Love.
Right, that's who I first talked to. I remember when I was first starting the show, I don't know who he is, but I just remember researching him.
Yeah.
You know about Kevin Love?
Yeah, and his father was in the Beach Boys.
Mm.
So, he comes from, high-level stock there.
Actually, one of the Beach Boys lives here. I used to teach one of their kids when I taught school a long time ago. Yeah. Nice family.
Oh, Bruce Johnson.
That's probably who it is, yeah.
So, but players, I mean, it's not in big numbers, but slowly they're coming out. And, it's been considered taboo.
Right.
Because, you don't want to show you sweat.
Well, also, I think men have just been, unfortunately, I mean, I know I have a 13-year-old son, so I'm always encouraging him to express himself, But I think men have been socialized to not show emotion, and then the men have been taught women are more emotional. But actually, I think everybody's emotional. And I think it's very satisfying and healthy to be able to reach in and understand kind of the vast array of what your emotional experiences are. And I do remember Kevin Love because when I first was researching sports maybe last year, his name came up because I think they started some kind of a foundation or, he's really been an impetus to get the NBA, I think, to look at mental health. So it's been a probably long process is what you're saying as far as people evaluating that.
Yeah, nobody wanted to touch it. And that it was done in a very secluded way. Each NBA team having a sports psychiatrist available, but it never went public that this player was seeing, getting any kind of therapy, getting any type of counseling. And so, not that it needs to be public, of course, but when a player or two shares this, I think it's good because it says it's okay.
Totally. Well, that's why I love that they're doing that. I respect that because, I guess they have a following, and if they can be a leader in that regard and diffuse that idea. I think for many decades, people thought, oh my gosh, that person has schizophrenia or something. I can't touch them or I'll get schizophrenia. I mean, even when I go in schools, I used to go into like 6th grade classrooms and the kids would say, are you sure I can't catch that from someone? And I'm like, nope, you can't catch it from touching someone. But people have misunderstandings, too, about mental health. I'm hoping we come up, too, with a different word. I like the Dalai Lama. He talks about how we're very focused on physical hygiene, but we don't have very good emotional or healthy emotional hygiene. So I think that's another way of looking at it. I mean, it kind of brings us to the idea of stigma, which is another word I feel like we didn't need a different word for. But just to briefly explain to the listeners about stigma, I think stigma is basically a way to kind of brand someone or mark someone, but it really diminishes someone from like a whole person to kind of like a tainted or like discounted one. So it's not very healthy. And I think it comes from our brain's tendency to create these categories. But I think people are much more than a category. And I broke it down into two types of stigma, which is social stigma and self-stigma. And I think self-stigma is very, very much more common, but it's the idea of like the mental health the person has a mental health issue going on, takes on what we call internalizes their perceptions of discrimination. So if they always thought, oh my gosh, my friend or whoever was depressed and everyone was pushing away from that person, and then now if I'd have depression, then I can't even look at that, you know what I mean? Because it's so repelling toward ourselves. Then there's the social stigma, which I think is another big piece, which is when we have attitudes and discriminating behavior that are directed toward individuals with mental health problems. Do you think that the other players are supportive of that in that social setting, or how do you think that happens?
Intimately, they are, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And then they're going to protect their teammate if they were to be questioned about it. They're going to show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'll support it, but they're not going to offer information, as they should not do that. It's very confidential. But you could maybe find a player or two that might sound callous to it, or not appear to take it serious. But that may be them that has not dealt with their own issues, and so they're actually avoiding some
so
pain.
We call that deflection. Yeah.
Well, that's a basketball term when you get a deflection out there.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If, let's say somebody makes a pass and the defender deflects it and then it ends up a steal, that deflection, NBA coaches, they preach and teach that.
Interesting.
Because deflections really affect the game. The shot clock's ticking down.
So it's not a positive thing? Or
It's a very positive
It's
thing.
very positive.
Deflections are awesome. Some coaches keep that as a statistic.
Cool. I'm learning something new about that. I never really known very much about basketball. I did watch basketball quite a bit when I was at UCSB, but I did win the free throw contest in elementary school. But there's a whole science to basketball. You know what I mean? That people really relate with. And I think back to even like Kobe Bryant. He really broke a lot of stigmas, right, about women and basketball, and also being black and playing basketball. I think his daughter, he really shined that through.
He kind of redeemed himself. Let's face it, he did have that charge
and that was
in
the
Colorado.
First thing I thought of. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Sure. And he lived his life. There was no phoniness. Being a father. There was no phoniness on the basketball court. He was so serious about it, so committed, and he treated his life after basketball playing the same. So people had so much respect for how he lived his life, and he was now a real endorser of women's basketball. That wasn't candy coating his past. He 4 daughters. That's amazing, you know?
I know. I feel like he kind of really did, like you're saying, come full circle. And I did think of that because I remember, I think I was like, I don't know, I was in that basketball scene at that time, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. Like, so let down. But then he redeemed himself, you know what I mean? And also maybe God or some other power gave him these daughters, you know what I mean? And so he had to kind of face how they were getting treated too.
And he was really being a true father / teacher. He had his daughter 7 a.m. that morning at church.
I know. It's amazing.
And so he was not just trying to make her into a basketball soldier or robot. He loved her that much that he was trying to develop her spiritual side
I was talking to another basketball player, and he was saying how, he was just really at the beginning right now of this whole new chapter. So it's just very unfortunate for a world. But although maybe it'll make people realize, too, the importance of those relationships and honoring women, and right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely a tragedy, though, for our world. I think I feel like a light kind of left, But, I feel like he's still here. His presence is still here. And, I think people are really realizing the importance of what he talked about. So hopefully that will help with people's well-being. I was wondering, from your experience, how do you think like mental health and being a professional athlete or playing basketball or working around athletics intersect?
Oh, it's all in the same grain. You know, when I was 26, I was working on my master's degree in sports psychology at Texas Wesleyan University in Fort Worth, and the head coach was 47 years old. He only knew me 2 days, and he hired me.
He saw something in you there.
Well, he knew. He knew I was hungry for basketball, and I would do anything to help him in developing the program, and I was wanting to work on my master's degree. So within 2 days, he gave me a place to live, small stipend, 3 meals a day, and I was his assistant coach. Unfortunately, 8 months later, he was suffering. The label back then was manic depressant, and the day of the first game of that second year I was there, he bought a gun and shot himself at Lake Arlington, which is between Dallas and Fort Worth. So we're all on the bus waiting for him at 3 o'clock, and he's not there, and his parents drove up. They were worried, and we just figured out he'll get in his car, he's doing something, and he'll follow us. He'll catch up to the bus and wave at us. But when we got there to Waco, Texas, there were the administrators there from the college that met me and said, "We need to talk to you." And they shared with me that he had taken his life that day at noon. And it was very traumatic for the players, for myself. 13 of the 15 players did not have fathers. So he was very much a father figure to them, and he loved them.
Sure.
But for me personally, I went through a lot of guilt. I was so naive to what suicide is.
Right.
And so I went through my guilt there, and the school hired a psychiatrist, and we all met with her individually. I'm very grateful they provided that, because during my time with her, she shared with me that he had gone through a divorce. He had 2 boys, 3 and 5 years old, and they got convinced, influenced that he didn't love them. So they didn't want to go see him on the weekends. He had the rights to be with them, and he got off his medication. And the psychiatrist shared that with me, and because he did change. I mean, he went from a happy guy. I didn't know that he had depression issues, and it turns out his mother suffered from that.
And manic, you're talking about bipolar.
Bipolar.
When bipolar has a very, very strong, you were starting to, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you're talking about his mom.
Please.
But it has a very strong genetic component. So if like a parent has bipolar, then it has a 75% genetic transmission rate. And what is his name, just so we can honor, what's his name again?
Johnny Howerton.
Johnny Howerton.
Yes.
I feel like he's with us, yeah.
Yeah, and
Inspired.
That information helped me so much with my guilt, because she shared with me he had gotten off his medication. His mother suffered and died at a very early age. And so,
Very tragic.
Oh, very tragic. And it put it in a much better understanding and perspective for me.
I mean, that's really cool in a way. It's very sad and heavy. And at the same time, that probably like influenced your entire career.
I was never the same.
And you mentioned that to me, I know, when we were talking before about that coach, yeah. Well, especially like you're saying, the players got affected, and then to be kind of coming from the mindset like, oh, well, he'll just catch up and not even realize, right? That's the thing is, I always tell people, they think, oh, that person has the perfect life. They look perfect. But every single person, I mean, I've treated tens of thousands of people. I do not know one person who has a perfect life. Maybe they have more elements in order, but I think everybody has something going on, and when the door closes, that's the problem, is we don't share what happens in our home and in our lives. It doesn't mean you have to share every tidbit, but maybe, like, if he had reached out, like you're talking about nowadays with the NBA, where there's that camaraderie. I don't know. I mean, do you think the coaches nowadays, is there that relationship with the coaches and the players where they would be more honest that way?
There's that awareness that those resources are available, that, go get help. You know, when you, quite frankly, it's one of my friends that was very much considering suicide. They said they heard the voices, and I understand that, go get help, rather than dig yourself in a hole and just seeing every day being darker, Well,
and like we were talking about last time, and even whenever I talk about suicide, I just think everybody, I mean, maybe not to the same degrees, but everybody feels futile at different points in their life, Maybe there's too much going on, or they just have maybe they have a chemical imbalance. I mean, I've treated many bipolar people, and actually I kind of have become like a specialist in that, and I really love working in that way, because if the person is on the right medication and they're getting therapy, actually the person can have a very successful life. They can enjoy their life and have a sense of well-being. But I think sometimes people like feeling that way too, so they don't take their medicine, because it does, it subdues the feelings of creativity or excitability. Also, sometimes people that have bipolar are very impulsive. You know what I mean? So we don't know, how long he had that gun, or, that's the thing is, I think it's really important to just ask the person too, do you have any ways that you would hurt yourself? Because that way at least maybe we would know, if they have a gun, right? Or they have a weapon, or...
Well, I think we're living in, hey, I'm a very positive person. I just want to say that.
Yes.
But I'm very realistic, and we're living in somewhat of a dark world right now.
Although the Dalai Lama says we're living in one of the most enlightened times.
Really? Well,
yeah.
Good. I like hearing that.
I know there is a lot of
I
darkness,
like
but
that.
For every dark, there's a light. At least in psychology, that's what we say. So, if you think of something maybe not, I'm watching your little puppy. He's got a little puppy that's licking his hand. I was thinking, well, we're talking about something really dark, but then you've got this cute puppy that's very light. So I think it's about finding that balance and learning how to, I kind of look at like a seesaw, or like juxtaposing, toggling back and forth, and realizing, okay, well, this is really wonderful, and this makes me super happy, and this, I do not like that. And that's another thing about psychology, is like holding the tension of the opposites, which I think we have a hard time doing, because we live, especially in America, we're much more kind of a little lopsided about presentation and who does that person have, what do they have, comparing. And making ourselves, just being loyal to ourselves and being friends with ourselves. So this experience that you had really impacted you and the players. And then how did the season go after that? Did everybody recover?
Well, the players were devastated by it, very numb, because this gentleman was like a father to them. So I was like a big brother. So there was a difference in philosophy somewhat with the head coach and with me, that he was the head coach. We always did things his way.
Deferred. Mm-hmm.
Right. I took over, and I didn't make any drastic changes, but I slowly started to implement some different things, and there were 2 players that did not accept that. And I think that was kind of symbolic in itself. They were so loyal to Coach Howerton, and they didn't want to see change. But we were starting to develop kind of a point where we were losing games. We were a small college. This was like Westmont playing UCSB and UCLA's. Our first semester, we played all Division I schools. And we were a program that had 18 full scholarships. So the school was very generous to athletics, but it was a small school. So, it was difficult to get Division one level players, because it was a small school, and we usually played the smaller colleges. But Coach Howerton, a credit to him, he believed in playing the best. Play the biggest, play the best. So we were playing Rice University, University of Texas, Texas Tech, SMU. The year before, we played Houston with Akeem Olajuwon, the Phi Slamma Jamma.
What's Akeem Olajuwon?
He was.
Oh,
he's
that's a player.
That's a player.
Sorry.
Hakeem. That's all right.
I need to learn.
He was from Nigeria and changed the game. He was just phenomenal at 6'10".
Oh yeah, he was really, really tall. Yeah.
Yes.
How tall are you?
6'4".
You seem very tall, but yeah, 6'10" is a whole nother level, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
So you had all these big schools that you were up against,
and losing to them, and so it was really, and along with that, the loss of our coach, we're losing these games, and realistically, it was going to prepare us very well for the regular schedule that started in January, and that's what happened. Then we started winning, and we were doing very well. We got into the regional playoffs, and we won 2 games on the road, which is very difficult to win on the road in playoffs. We won those to play in the district championship to go to the nationals, and we played the top team, ranked number 1 in the nation, and averaging 105 points a game. They were in Sports Illustrated.
You had your basketball touch you gave to them.
Yeah. Paul Quinn University. And so we lost to them by 3 points. Yeah.
It still sounds like it was a positive streak there.
Well, it was positive in the fact that we just kept moving forward. It was a life learning experience, and I stay in touch with these players.
I know. I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool to have a little plaque or some? I don't know. Did you guys ever do anything in the basketball stadium there?
We've talked about having a reunion and bring all the players back, and
it'd be cool to have that guy's his
him.
picture. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's important to keep people's spirit alive.
Absolutely.
That way. I like what the guest Deb, your friend, said last week too about people transcending, right? Is that he's transcended. But I think it's still important to keep that alive too. You know what I mean? Because that person had such a big impact. I think though, the important part about mental health too is that there's a healing kind of process. And I think that however, if you want to share it or you don't want to share it, it's a totally personal choice. But I just think it can be very empowering to talk to somebody and tell them what you've experienced. And I know I don't think everyone has to share their experience, but I think it's important for each person to heal from what they've had to endure and go through on a daily basis. Because some people really are suffering, for long time periods, and they just don't say anything. And everybody's brain and nervous system is wired so differently from at birth.
Very true.
I'm always just trying to understand why we've chosen to overlook the importance of mental health, even though I'm so happy because now people in magazines and other places are really reaching out for mental health. So I think we're shifting now. Thanks for sharing that, Curt. I was wondering, why do you think reducing mental health stigma is so essential?
Well, I think if one feels like they're being labeled, that in itself can really suppress you. So,
you mean reaching who you want to be or what your goals are?
Right, exactly.
So it doesn't allow you to become fully who you are?
Yeah, it restricts you and puts limits on you. And, life is about overcoming obstacles, challenges. Yep. And you take your bad experiences and how long, the old adage, when you get thrown off the horse, how long does it take you to get back up on it, Because you just want to get back up on the horse and ride again, and you've learned from it. It's made, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
Well, and that is the key point of what I think you're saying for me, is that if we can learn, it doesn't mean, I think the idea, what we've come to is I failed at that, so I'm a failure. I can't overcome that. But actually, I think our quote-unquote failures actually are great opportunities for us to learn. And to say, okay, actually next time when I get into that situation or I have to deal with that predicament, I'm going to incorporate what I learned from that. But sometimes we do need friends or other people to help us, get to that place. Don't you think we need support?
Oh, I think everybody needs a mentor.
Exactly.
And if it's not a parent, if somebody or a very close friend that you trust.
That's true.
Everything's about trust.
Yep.
But when you have a mentor, someone that's already been down the road and experienced a lot of things, and they can share their wisdom.
For sure.
Because, man, I had lunch today with a gentleman that's 83 years old. He acts like he's 53. Yeah. But I'm all ears with him because I want to soak up his wisdom.
Totally.
Yeah, because he's very active.
It's important, like, to have luminaries, like, or people you look up to, because we get inspiration. And also, I do think there's a lot of wisdom that we can pass to each other. I feel very thankful I fell into mindfulness meditation with all these, like, world leaders, because 10 years ago, I just happened to be doing my fellowship with this physician who got trained and worked with the Dalai Lama. And so I feel very thankful for that. But I still meet with her and have coffee. And I think we can continue those relationships throughout our entire life, too. And then that helps us when we get into challenging situations. I just think in sports, there's just a lot of machismo. And, maybe do you think that basketball kind of as a sport, it has a lot of ego and competition, and there's a lot of masculine energy out there.
Ooh, big time.
I think that there's, like, been seen in the past, like, sports-related mental or emotional problems were weaknesses. And so I think a lot of people mask their pain in silence. But I also think it's really like a societal problem, because as men are told to, kind of shut up and don't cry and suck it up. And I had the Montecito fire chief on. He was saying, he's been a fireman for 35 years. And he said, for the first 20 years of his career, it was suck it up, buttercup. And now they've implemented, like the NBA, all these wonderful programs for the firemen and first responders. But what's just always so fascinating to me is, like, if we tore an ACL, or an MCL or some part of our body, or if we go down with a physical injury, people are very sympathetic, toward that. But if we go through something mentally or emotionally, there's some pretty negative stigmas that have been associated with that. So I think we're getting past that, though, which is great. We just need more awareness, like you were saying, about our mental and emotional health nowadays.
And I think there's a lot of times we don't know what to say. If somebody, if a friend or someone shares with us something they're going through. I have a close friend here in town who lost their son to overdose. And she has shared with me over the years that some people would say the wrong things to her, and she had to bite her tongue to not really come back at them hard out of her pain. But, a lot of times we don't know what to say.
Although I think it's better to be more genuine, and sometimes even if you don't say it perfectly, because I like this one patient, he said we need to be more transparent. He was talking about parenting, but I like that transparency. I just think that then people feel like they cross a line, like, oh, they're not acting appropriately. There is no perfect way to say it.
No.
And sometimes, out of challenging conversations, actually, I think we do grow closer to, other people. So I'm hoping that people will, diffuse that. And also, I think it's important to get educated about, And that woman actually probably has some wisdom, right, that she could share about the truth of the matter in a way, because she's lived it. And when we've experienced something, it really changes the whole perspective.
Time has helped her, how she can cope with that pain. It was her first son.
Well, losing a child.
21 years old.
Oh, it's agonizing. Yeah, that's why life is so fragile, right? As
Right.
I look at the T-shirt with Kobe on there. Yeah, it's just, I think that's why also we have to have gratitude, and I think caring and kindness toward each other is really important.
Well, and I'll take it further, but this is just my personal life, my personal story. I became a head college coach at 26, and I wanted to be successful, and it really was about my ego. Sad to say, my self-esteem was based on wins. And I wasn't bipolar, but let me tell you, when we lost, I took it so personal, and I wasn't fun to be around for the next day, even with the players. I worked them real hard that next practice. I wanted them to know I don't like losing. I hope you don't. But I took it, I think, way too serious. You can get the same results of winning or losing just by being a teacher and building their confidence as a person, building their confidence in their skills by teaching and encouraging. And I put pressure on myself, and I think I put pressure on the players. And I'm sharing that because I'm more mature today. And then when I look at life, I really had no room for the spiritual side.
That's true.
And so my spiritual was when I was needed something real bad. Oh God, I need help, and bail me out here. That's the only time. And as I've taken this journey, I've discovered, man, I get peace and joy and comfort, not through accomplishments in life, not through achievements, but really waking up each morning and treating the day how special it is, and be kind to others. And I'm not trying to get all gummy here.
No, it's
I'm
true
just telling you, hey, I was a very self-centered person and love coaching, but that's what maturity fortunately can do.
Kind of sink into that.
Yeah.
And if you're just joining us here, I'm with Curt Pickering, and Curt basically has had an amazing career in the NBA and in many different capacities. He's worked with many different teams. He's traveled all over the world. So I'm here listening to his tidbits of wisdom about mental health and well-being and stigma and how that intersects with being a professional athlete or basketball player. I mean, I played competitive tennis, and my coach was Tony Trabert, and he was like number one in the world in the 50s. And I remember one thing, he was a very elegant player, but also he always taught sportsmanship. And he's like, whether you win or lose, it's how you carry yourself on the court. It's how you wrap up. It's how you are as a winner. It's how you are as a loser. It's like, it's all those mechanics of the game too. And it's true. I think over time, if you can incorporate like you're learning, it sounds like, and be able, that takes a lot of strength to be able to say, I reflected back and wow, maybe I was too hard. But then you incorporate that into how you, operate today. And I like what you said about how you start your day. And I think that's a very critical piece that I tell my patients too. It's so important to just take 10 seconds even, just to have a moment of just appreciation to get your day started that way. I mean, even if you have something like an object by your bed, like a seashell or a rock or a picture, or I like even to watch the sun coming in, because if we don't have the sun, we can't live. So, you can find little ways to sprinkle that throughout your day.
Well, and there's great spiritual or motivational online resources.
Yep,
man,
like
it's easy to go to the computer. That's what I do. I start my day with devotions, and wow, they really get my mind very positive and with purpose for that day.
The power of positivity.
Oh, absolutely.
It's important. What do you think, Curt, that your work in the professional athlete world of basketball fields has taught you about the attitudes that people hold toward mental health? Do you think people, I know we talked about that there's programs and that people are shifting. Do you think that that's just like, if you didn't bring it up, would people talk about it? Or is it just kind of more that it sounds...
Yeah, they still really don't talk about it. And that would be more of a one-on-one conversation.
Right, so it's more intimate.
And when you develop relationships, the beauty is if that's a quality relationship and they trust you, they may drop little hints. And that's where I'm saying mentorship comes in, because I don't play anymore. I'm the mentor. And when I spend time with be it players or younger coaches, I'm very open to them dropping little innuendos, or just kind of offering that little window of conversation that they really want to talk about it.
I think people do too. That was kind of related to my next question, was like, how do you feel like a person who's in that basketball world receiving support could help a person through mental health crisis? Like, if you have support from your mentors and your players and the basketball crew, how do you think that could help a person through a mental health crisis?
Oh, absolutely.
Because it sounds like you've seen that too with some of these players, where they've just kind of what was that first person you were talking about?
Keon Dueling.
Keon Dueling. And what team did he play for?
He was with several, but the Clippers, he played very well with them. Mm-hmm. That's where he stands out the most.
Is he still
was
playing?
with Miami. No,
he stopped.
He could have played a couple years ago, but this
took him down a little bit.
This took him down. Absolutely. I mean, he checked himself in.
That's okay, though. I mean, at least he's getting help.
Of course.
I mean, I'm proud of him for doing that, even though I don't know him.
No, he is now a spokesman and ambassador for the NBA with mental health.
So he's inspiring others.
He is inspiring others. His story is on Players Tribune. Like, that's another online resource. And Kobe and Derek Jeter,
part of that too.
They created that online service. It's free, called Players Tribune. Every day, it's just stories of athletes in every sport. And
Players Tribune.
Yeah, Players Tribune. And so you could go to Keon Dueling and read it. Wow, what a powerful story.
I will read that. Well, I know also that the NBA has kind of picked up the integrated player development model. So there's more like kind of integration and installation of these mental health resources within the player development departments. So I think that the old tagline is kind of changing, right, as far as how people are talking about it. And also it's cool because you have so much skill as a basketball coach, as a basketball player, but then you've had these other experiences that you've kind of woven in, especially your first coaching kind of experience. Wow, that's a profound, you know what I mean? But in a way, I feel like things happen for a reason. So maybe, you know what I mean? You've probably helped a lot of other players, you know what I mean, through that experience.
Well, the truth is, when you treat these athletes like a person first, and then you show you care about their family or, maybe their siblings, and then basketball becomes third, wow, the relationship thrives. Mm-hmm. They are very coachable. They care about you. You care about them. And on the court, there's that trust.
Probably takes a lot of extra energy for you to do that, though, huh? But then the payoff is that you have those benefits you're explaining on the court.
It's about relationships.
It is.
And you can do it at the NBA level. It used to be said you couldn't. It still kind of said, oh, you can't do that at college Division I level. You got to keep your distance. If the head coach isn't comfortable with it, if he has someone on his staff that can really nurture the players, they need that.
Sure.
We're all at the college level, 18 to 22.
You're still young. Did you know
they're
your
very
brain...
fragile? I'm talking about self-confidence and their personal life and
your
social
brain doesn't
life.
even fully myelinate until you're 26. You know what I mean? So actually, until we're 26, we don't even have a fully developed brain.
I was 36 when that
Exactly. Well, and I'm that way too. My brain's taken a long time to mature. That's the other thing is everybody's at a little different rate. So we don't. That's why when we compare ourselves to other people, it's like, well, maybe all the other factors aren't in place. You know what I mean? So it could be a totally different predicament. But I'm really happy that you're out there doing this because I think this is a really, really critical piece. I think for people to have a sense of well-being, to feel like their life is valuable, not just as an athlete, as someone who's producing and that way, you know what I mean? I mean, it is something to feel proud of. But then there's like you're talking, there's the spiritual and emotional pieces of the person that need to be addressed too. So that's a wonderful gift. Curt, if there's someone that's listening, like who's interested in basketball or being a professional athlete or being involved in that world, how do you have any tips on how to approach like that kind of your profession from a healthy approach? Like, do you have any recommendations from all your years of experience about that?
Well, do you want to be good or do you want to be great? If you want to be great, then you need to get up at 5 a.m. like Kobe did. I mean, the guy had a work ethic that was unmatched other than maybe Michael Jordan, Larry Bird. There's only a handful, Magic Johnson, just a handful that really, truly wanted to be great, and they backed it up with dedicated effort every day.
Takes a big commitment.
Not 8 months out of the year. They were dedicated to it.
Yep.
So, and if you want to be good, then, it's the same factor, but you may not put as much time in. Maybe you have a better balanced life, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a good basketball player.
Well, and everybody's not going to be at the
that.
level of, like, you know what I mean? That's the other thing is now everyone thinks, okay, I need to be like Kobe Bryant. But Kobe, I mean, he had a very unique, I'm sure he probably could have, you know, genetically it'd be interesting, but he probably may have even been born just with that propensity. But the drive was big. I hear what you're saying. I know. My husband played professional tennis, and it was like we were dating, you know, and you have to get up early. You have to eat broccoli and like chicken for breakfast, you know.
Play the Rocky theme song, raw eggs.
And drip with sweat, you know what I mean, for hours on end, and really push yourself, you know, and then you're traveling, and it can be and he had a really intense schedule, especially that he had at the family end. But I think that was a passion for him. I every time we talk about Kobe, I remember the Lakers used to come here and practice, and so I'd be sitting in class, and I think I mentioned this to you, and it's like there would be nobody. I mean, this is in the like the mid-90s or something. They'd come and they'd be wearing all their Laker outfits and get off the bus over by Rob Gym. Mm-hmm. And it was like nobody was there. It was like nobody even knew they were there. But I was sitting in my math class, and I remember I was just watching. I was like, oh, there they are. So I think, though, he grew into that, too, right? He really, I mean, he fell into this position, and he just wrote it out there. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. But I still feel like he left such a big light. I guess that's my optimistic piece, you know, with his girls and with basketball.
There are positives.
Yeah.
There truly
and also
is.
overcoming adversity, right? Like, because he did have that situation with that girl. But he really, and all of us have situations like that. But it's like, what do we do with it? You know what I mean? Because if we beat ourselves up, that's not going to help us feel better. So we really have to, like, do something. I think turn our worry into action is really healthy. And we have time just for maybe a question or more, too. This time goes by fast. Kurt, how do you think we could begin working toward acceptance of mental health and well-being, just in general?
Well, this show right here, it's good to talk about it.
Thank you.
You know, it's good to talk about it. It's, you know, if you have a issue, you know, something that's troubling you, boy, the internet is amazing. There's resources to go to. If you can't go to somebody, you're not comfortable. It's all about finding solutions when you have issues that are troubling you.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of options out there. I always tell people to, like, find a match. You know, you can always go meet different people, not necessarily even a therapist, but just whoever it is, you know, and kind of check it out and see if they understand what you're going through to some degree. And if you feel understood and, you know, cared for. And I think sometimes, actually, I mean, I've had people on who have gone through suicide attempts, and it's like, I think just having a listening ear, you know, even when we're at that degree of despair, to have somebody just say, I'm here listening to you is really critical. And how do you think that it's important within our community, like, to talk about mental health? I mean, in our own little nucleus community. I mean, do you think that it ripples out to other communities, or?
Yeah, well, and I liken all this to the mudslides, the fires that we experience. I experienced it firsthand. The property I live on, a house burnt down. The mudslides were 400 yards away. And my son and I, that next day, we walked throughout Montecito, and it was a bit traumatizing, but we were helping others.
It still is traumatizing. I still see people from the debris flow. And I was a first responder, and I'm just kind of finally getting, you know, I mean, I gave a lot. I went to a lot of funerals and schools, and yeah, it is. It's still, our community is still recovering. That's why it is, I agree, that it's important for our community, right, to talk about mental health.
Yeah, the community coming together and stepping up when you think you're doing it, you know, dealing with it all by yourself. And the more awareness it creates, and it's on the news, you know, because you want that community to come together, support each other.
Well, and if our community can come together as a micro community, we can ripple that out to other, you know, to the world, right? I feel like we can spread that.
Now, if we can just do that with our politicians, huh?
Oh my gosh! Wow, that's another topic people have been coming and talking about. Yeah, our world's at a big crossroads. But I think, you know, I mean, I remember I did my thesis on Gandhi at UCSB, and he always said, out of turbulence comes peace. So I feel like, yeah, we're in a very turbulent time. But maybe that will make people realize, too, more what's important to them. You know, I don't know. It's just, yeah, there's a lot of tension, for sure. But I mean, I think having compassionate conversations really builds inclusiveness, whether it's you and I or, you know, we go out in the world and it teaches others what you've learned. And I think we can do this by starting to treat each other's equal and reducing discrimination. So let's create conversations and a culture that are accepting of each person as we work toward more prevention. I want to thank you for coming on the show, Curt, and sharing your story and your experiences. I was wondering, do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Well, you know, I love the game of basketball, but it takes a back seat to really the most important things in life, and that's relationships with family members, with friends, the community, and that's truly what's most important to me. You know, I mean, on this earth that we live, it's really about relationships, that we don't isolate ourselves.
Well, that's an illusion, too, because I think we're all interconnected. I mean, even as we're driving down the road, we think, oh, I'm in a car, I'm kind of but we are all interrelating, and the Dalai Lama says we're all breathing in each other's air. You know what I mean? Even you and I sitting in the studio, we've exchanged that. I'm just saying, I think it's really kind of important to break that down, too. I'm agreeing with you. And just feel more connected and not isolated. It's true. We'll have to talk more about that. Talk about why people do that. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom.